Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Wealth Conversation podcast with me, Tsitsi Mutiti. I guide high-achieving women on their journey to build lasting wealth so they can prepare for an abundant future in every area of their life. I hope that today's episode will help you to transform your relationship with money so you can make the choices that will enable you to create the opportunities and lasting wealth that you desire. Let's get straight into this week's episode. Hey there, it's good to have you back with us. So I know you've been listening to this podcast every single week and that you've been taking in the wealth of knowledge from all the guests that have been on the podcast so far. But a lot of you have told me that you haven't taken any action, mainly because you're not sure where to start. And I get it, because I've been there before. The good news is that I can definitely help you get clear on the 3 steps that you can take straight away to create the solid foundation that you desire. So head to the show notes and click the link to book a Power Hour session with me. There's definitely never been a better time to become the designer of your financial future. For this episode, I have invited independent financial planner and certified financial coach, Julie Flynn, to discuss how emotions impact the way we charge for services and products. Years of qualifications and research have led Julie to have a unique understanding of how our brains behave under stress and how this impacts on our financial decision-making and well-being. Julie works with women experiencing or planning significant change in their lives. She is the founder of Ebb Flow Financial Coaching, where she focuses on her work with women who have lost their partner. She also coaches women wanting to change how they charge for their services. Welcome, Julie, to the Wealth Conversation podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. I've got to say, I am truly honored to be here with you today and to get a chance to speak with your listeners.
The honor is all mine, Julie. After this, my listeners will know why I think you are such a phenomenal person and a force of nature.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't know that.
You are. And I'm sure by the end of this episode, people will know why. So could you share a bit more about yourself and your background?
Okay, so my background is I've been in financial services for a very, very long time, even though I look quite young. And I work as a financial advisor, but I'm also, like yourself, a certified financial coach. And over the last few years, I've started to work with very specific groups. So the one that I'm probably best known for is I work with women that have lost their partner. So yeah, that's kind of what I do.
And in addition to supporting women who've lost their partners, you also support women in financial services to charge fair and meaningful fees. Why is that important to you?
All right, I'm glad you asked that because it's something I've accidentally started doing over the last sort of 18 months. And I feel really strongly about financial advice fees. I know it's a strange thing to get excitable about, but it's so complicated. And I think people get frustrated because they're trying to figure out how much it costs to work with one of us. And we can't give them a straight answer. And it's not on purpose. And so my vision is, I think it would be amazing if we could all have our fees on our websites, because I believe that that's a big barrier for people for coming to us and getting the help and the support that we can offer because they don't know what we charge. And we know that when people have a trusted decision partner when it comes to money, it's delivering better outcomes all over, not just to do with money, but to do with people's health, be that physical or mental, outcomes for their family. It's just, yeah. So that's why it's so important to me to help people get really transparent and get clarity around what they charge to make us more accessible to people like your listeners.
Yeah, I hear you. Even for me, when a client comes and, they've got other financial services providers, for me to kind of work out what the charges are, it's difficult. You have to trawl through either a lot of pages in a report to get to the charges, and then they're not clear, or like you say, it's not visible on the website, and that's normally the first place people look. You have to dig deep. For me, if I can't find it in 3 clicks, I give up.
Yeah. Do you know what the most frustrating thing is? Like, because I do a lot of research this, you find the website and then it's got a tab that says our fees, and you click on it.
Yeah.
And what it says is, we charge fair and transparent fees that will be made available to you after a conversation. And you're like, you were expecting a page that told you the numbers.
Yeah.
And what you've got is a generic statement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I can understand it, because some of this also depends on what the client is looking for, what their circumstances are. And sometimes it's only after the conversation where the client or the individual realizes that the problem that they thought was the problem is not actually the problem, and it's something else. But I can see where not being transparent about the fees from the financial services side creates a lot of confusion.
No, absolutely. And I think, I know that one of the big things for you is about clarity.
Mm.
And yeah, there are so many moving parts in what we do that is really difficult. There isn't one size fits all. But if we as businesses, and I would say this to anybody that their business is about providing a service, because pricing services is really hard to do, is if you get really clear, if you've got clarity about what it is you do, who you do it with, then all of a sudden it starts to get a lot easier to explain what it is you charge for what you do.
That is so true. I actually went through that process myself when I decided to go down the financial coaching route and set up a business. And coming up with my method made it actually easier for me to be able to justify, why I charge what I charge and what I do as well. Because in the beginning, I just kind of come up with a statement and I knew what I was providing, but I couldn't articulate it. So then having some sort of formula really made it easier for me. It sounds like you're saying that's the key, the first step for this charging process.
Right. You can see I've got that smile on my face. You know there's something coming, don't you?
Yes.
Right. So listening to you talk there, one of the words that jumped out at me is justify. Going through the process of building your method and knowing what you do, you said it makes it feel easier for you to justify what you charge. Now, who is it you're going to justify it to? Is it to yourself or is it to your clients?
This is it. It's when I talk to people who are concerned about their charges, this does come up. And I think looking back now, it was about justifying it to myself. And I feel it's a big barrier that a lot of budding entrepreneurs have to push through, because we have got our own, negative record going on in our brain that's saying, well, for me, it was like, well, first of all, I was comparing myself with other people and thinking, well, she appears to be more visible than I am. I find it difficult to post one thing on Instagram, and like, how can I even want to charge the same level as that person, even though I knew the qualifications are there to justify everything else is there. I've tried, the method is tried and tested. But it was just, justifying it to myself and kind of dealing with the mind monkeys that kept coming up with this chatter about maybe you're not good enough, or you haven't had enough clients, or no one really knows you, or people might think, who do you think you are? And I think a lot of people who are thinking about starting their own business go through that kind of justification process.
Yeah, we've all got this dialogue running through our heads. And like, so any of your listeners that do run their own business, and particularly if it's a service-based business. So what I found is, from speaking to my hairdresser, to speaking to the guy that fixes my car, to other financial advisors, broadly, everybody's following the same pattern. And that is, they look at what everybody else is doing and then they pitch themselves in the middle.
Yeah.
And we do that because it kind of feels safe, because you're not drawing attention to yourself too much there. So you're in the middle of the pack. But it's, if we go down that route, there's always a chance it's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. But what I say to the women that I work with is, what will make it so much easier is if you start getting really intentional about what it is you're charging. So be aware of what everybody else is doing and then forget it. And then sit down and think about what it is you do and what it is you offer, and who your ideal client is. So if your ideal client is, let's say, a single mom on minimum wage, okay, they're not going to pay a premium price. It's fact.
Yep.
At the same time, if you're pitching at the other end of the scale, so very, very wealthy clients, you lose credibility if you price too low. So it's kind of be aware of what the parameters are, but then get really intentional about what you want to charge. The number has to mean something to you, because when that price means something to you, when you explain it to someone else, it does come across with a lot more conviction and it has clarity because it means something to you. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Right.
I'm like, I wish I'd spoken to Julie 2 years ago. That is so true, actually. And then that leads me to the question around emotions, right? How do our emotions actually impact the way we charge? What are the emotions that sometimes are at play when we're getting to that point of finding the number that we hopefully can confidently talk about and put on our website?
The little gremlins in your head, they don't stop. They move around and they change. All right. But trying to find that number and what's going on emotionally. So I've been in this situation where I'm sitting in front of a client and I know I've got to say what I cost. My mouth will start to go dry. My palms might get a bit sweaty. I'm gonna stumble over my words a little bit as well. Because what's happened is in my head, there might be something like, oh, they're not going to pay this. They're going to say, what? So I've had the thought, and then that thought set off a physical reaction. So hence the dry mouth and everything. And the thought is leading to the feeling. So we've got the physical feeling, and then just that. I don't think I'm that unusual, and that probably lots of people will relate to this. It's that little feeling in there of you're not good enough.
Exactly.
You're not good enough. And then we've had the thought, we've got the feeling, and now we're going to get the behavior that goes along with it. And this is the thing that I come across the most is in your head, you had one price, and by the time it makes it out your mouth, it's a different price and it's lower than the one that was in your head.
Oh my goodness, I've been there, done that.
I come across this all the time. And it's the journey between the number in your head and the number that comes out your mouth. It's all started with that thought. So it's spotting the thoughts and then recognizing the feelings that are tapping into it. And then just kind of challenging yourself on that, because you are good enough.
Yeah, I went through a journey where I knew the price I wanted to charge, but I started much lower. And after like the second client, I was so annoyed with myself because I'm like, the value that they got out of this is so much. And there was actual tangible proof that, the method was working and was right for them. They had more money in their bank than when they started with me, and it was more than what I charged them.
That's because you're a phenomenal coach.
Thank you. So I decided that I was going to increase my price like after every second client until I got to the one I wanted to charge, just to made it a bit easier for me. But I felt that I could have had more conviction earlier on, so I didn't have to go through the whole beating myself up, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business people who are starting out go through that emotion of, why did you do that? So there's this back and forth in your head, which then is layered with maybe the next one won't be able to afford, or maybe I should just stay this low, because you're pitching yourself in the middle.
Yeah. And what happened, what it sounds like happened to you is you had your target price and then you started lower. And I say that's absolutely fine, because then you actually had a plan for moving yourself towards it. So it's taking small steps, because if we go right in at the deep end, it scares the living daylights out of us and it's deadly uncomfortable. But what happened after your first client is you had evidence then, didn't you?
Yeah.
That you knew what you were doing worked. And so that's what my advice would be to your listeners that run their own businesses or provider services. Look for the evidence of how good you are at what you do. And one of the things I see really often is that I feel that we do it back to front when it comes to setting our prices. And that is, we look at what we do and we might think about, how much time did it take us to do that? Or how much time can I not spend doing something else to do this thing? And really what we should be doing is looking at the outcomes that we're delivering for people. Because although something might only take you an hour to do, Sitsi, right? You think about the years of experience and knowledge and qualifications that have gone into delivering the value in that 1 hour. All right. So it's look at the impact and the outcomes that you're delivering for people. And then, so let's say it's dead easy for a financial advisor to save someone tens of thousands of pounds in tax. That's
Yep.
really easy for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it might only take us 90 minutes to do that. Now, are we basing it on the 90 minutes or the 20 years of experience that went into us being able to deliver that outcome?
Such a good question. Because I think for me in the beginning and quite a lot of entrepreneurs that I've spoken to, you look at the amount of time you spend. So, I'm only going to be spending an hour. But what I've realized over time is that 60 minutes could have saved someone 5 years of confusion and mistakes. And sometimes it's difficult for the person receiving the service in this instance to realize that or acknowledge that until way later, maybe a year down the line, where they're like, actually, if those sessions helped me to get to this point. And I think that's where, when you're the service or product provider, it's important to be able to articulate that you're helping them get to point B much faster than if they were to do it on their own.
Yeah, and I think as well as particularly with what you do for a living, I think you're delivering the results for your clients. But the thing that I get really emotional about it is it's not just your clients, it's the generations. When you help people change something for themselves today, they can teach their children that, and then their children. And that, I just think that makes the hairs on my arm stand up.
Yeah, that's priceless. That is priceless. Oh, well, I might be looking at my prices after this. Yeah, I'll be thinking about that. But no, I think it's something that a lot of small business owners need to acknowledge, that they are not just impacting potentially the person who they're helping, who they're sitting in front of. It's the generations that come behind them. I know, Julie, that you are focusing on women in financial services, and you do have a program where you're supporting them to charge with ease. Could you just share a little bit on what that program is about, the areas that you focus on, and maybe some of the results that have come out of it, if you don't mind?
Okay. So what the program does is it's kind of covering off what I mentioned already about being intentional about what fees you want to charge, and the fact that it has to mean something to you. Because historically, as an industry, we've had a really bizarre way of charging for what we do that involves percentages. And I've yet to meet an individual yet where a percentage means something to them. All right, so how can you sit there and explain to someone that this will cost X percent? Because it doesn't mean anything. So it's about sort of walking through the steps of, right, how do we figure out a number that is meaningful to you? And it's about understanding who you work with and what it is you're actually doing, then learning to articulate that. And it's understanding, so we spend a lot of time looking at the dialogue that's going on through our heads when we build up to deciding what our fees are, when we're explaining what our fees are. But then that's what's going on in our head. But it's then also looking at it from a client point of view. What's the client experiencing? I think probably one of the key things that sort of blew us all away on the first course was that realization that when we're sitting in a meeting and we're all getting really nervous about explaining what it is we charge, we're like, oh God, I've got to say in a minute, I don't want to do it. It's that realization the client sitting opposite you might be sitting there thinking, oh my God, I love the sound of what it is they're suggesting they can do. I so want to work with them. What if I can't afford it? Oh God. And it's just understanding that both parties could be sitting there with that feeling of not being good enough. And it doesn't have to be that way. And it's just understanding the different emotional journeys that both the client and as an advisor that you'll go through in the fee conversation, and what you can do to change the dialogue in your head and make it an easier journey, not just for you, but for your client. Let's make it comfortable for the client, because that's what it's all about.
Wow. That is new information to me. I'd never actually thought about the client going through that emotional journey as well, at the same time as the advisor or the individual who's going to say how much they charge. But it is so true that, we're all individuals, and we are impacted by this sort of thing where, as a client, it's a decision that you have to make. And it's normally when it's a decision about our own good, doing something for ourselves, that it becomes difficult. Yeah. And you've got these two parties sitting across the table from each other, going through this mind chatter at the same time, and we both don't know that it's happening to the other person.
Just as well we can't see in each other's heads, isn't it?
Yeah. So it just makes me think of, with the prevalence of online businesses, how putting a price on your website is similar to that whole thing of sitting across the table from someone new. The person who's going to go onto your website will be thinking, as they're scrolling through, oh, this sounds really good, I need this, what if I can't afford it because it sounds so good? And this is when they're getting from the top of the page to the bottom. And the individual who's going to put the price on their website is thinking, what if they think it's too much, or what if they can't afford it, or am I good enough to put this out there in the market? That's fascinating.
No, and I think one of the things with all the women that I work with, they all have this burning desire to be fair. They want their fees to be fair. So fair for them and fair for the client. And the person they're probably missing out in the equation is themselves. They've been running around trying to be fair to clients, and they're actually not being fair to themselves. Or they've been running around thinking they're being fair to clients. And there was a big shock moment during the course when kind of explained to them, right, if you do it like this, the way we've always done it, do you want to guess how much growth a client could miss out on? So I think we used the example of someone investing £100,000 over, say, 40 years. Now, if they charge the way most financial advisors charge, that client is going to miss out on £350,000 worth of growth.
Wow.
So that did not tick their fair box, so they stopped doing it that way.
No, that's not fair at all. But that's so interesting. Where does this wanting to be fair come from?
Well, I'm not sure, because I do just work with women. I don't know. It could be even just the people that I attract, because it's like one of my core values is things have to be fair. It has to be equitable, and it has to feel good. So maybe I just attract people like that. I'm not really sure where it comes from.
Yeah. But I think it is a trait that a lot of women, or people who are in this kind of caregiving profession, because financial services, as much as it's put out there as this evil profession of greedy people, we're actually out there to help people and make things fair, create a level playing field in some instances. And I think you're always thinking about that, the result, and also just making it accessible to as many people as possible.
I love that we're in a caregiving profession. Yeah. I'm having that.
I think it is, because really, before we can do anything, we really have to understand the individual and make sure that whatever it is that we suggest, or the route that we take them down, is really, that word's going to come out, suitable for them. And you have to exercise a level of care. So I wonder why not more women are in the profession.
Well, I don't think it's immediately obvious that we're a caregiving profession.
No.
And I think, that's something, hopefully, people like you and I going out there and talking about what we do, we can get that message across.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, Julie, to any woman or man who's listening to this episode and has been kind of going through that dialogue in their head about charging, and maybe they've put themselves in the middle, what would you say to them right now?
Sit down and throw your charges away and think about how you want your life to look. And that's not just about how much money you want your business to make. It's about how much time you want to spend doing it. So I'm really clear on this, because for a long period of time, I couldn't work more than 20 hours a week. So that's why I have some serious clarity around what I charge. So it's just get really clear about how much time you're prepared to spend in your business, and then how much you need that business to make for you, and use that as your starting point rather than what everybody else is doing.
I love that. Not many people, advise you to think about how you want your life to look. I think that's amazing. Well, Julie, I could talk on and on and on about this topic with you, but I know you have limited time. So, actually, one thing, you have got a podcast. Could you share a little bit about this podcast, please?
Okay, so as we've already established, financial services is a caring profession. All right, so we're second only to the NHS. So myself and a group of very talented financial professionals, including your good self, are launching the Women and Money Cafe podcast. So it's off the back of, we ran a clubhouse room for a year, and it's a group of us all getting together to help empower women around money. So I think the three words that underpin what we do, it's about empowerment, community, and fun around money. Thank you for giving me the chance to plug it.
No, yeah, it's definitely one of the podcasts you should be listening to on a weekly basis, including this one, of course. A wonderful group of women and lots of laughter. It's fun to be on that podcast. Thank you so much, Julie, for coming onto this podcast. As you know, I believe that to create true wealth, we must all be clear on what wealth means to us in each area of our life. So in a few words, could you share with us what wealth means to you in terms of your physical, mental, spiritual, social, and financial well-being?
If I was to put it into a few words, it's all about relationships. That's what contributes to all of those aspects of wealth for me. But I'm a bit late to the boundary party. So the new edition is boundaries. So relationship and good boundaries is what equals wealth for me.
Oh, I love that. Relationship and good boundaries. I love that. I love that. Julie, how can anyone get in touch with you if they want to work with you in the various capacities that you support people? And I guess one that we didn't touch on today, but definitely I think I'll bring you on about that, is for women who've lost their partners. If there's anyone listening who thinks they'd love to work with you in that aspect.
Okay, so best way to get hold of me is actually hello@ebbandflow.uk. And the website is www.ebbandflow.uk. And from there, for anybody that has lost their partner, there's a load of resources on there. Or just drop me a message with any questions and I'll always reply.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'll put the email address and your link to the website in the show notes. Thank you so much, Julie, for being an amazing guest and for being so clear on the area of charging and emotions. I think I'm definitely going to ask you back to talk about everything else that you do. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much. And I know anyone listening to this podcast episode who's been struggling with charging has found some level of clarity from what you've shared today.
Oh, look, thank you very, very much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Connect with me at The Wealth Conversation on Facebook and Instagram so we can continue the discussion. Also, if you're ready to define what wealth truly means to you, then go to thewealthconversation.com and download the Wealth Cornerstones Guide. Until next week, stay focused on becoming the designer of your financial future.